are looking live.
There's something sacred about this stadium and its setting. There's nothing like this venue, in my opinion, in all of sports.
The setting is about as good as anywhere in the country. With the San Gabriel Mountains in the backdrop, it's always picturesque.
We're gonna play football. He's going for the corner. He's got it. Vince Young scores.
Hey, my name is Steve Balton, and I am a journalist for Forbes. I host a couple of podcasts, do some work with the Rose Bowl, do a lot of different things. And today I'm very honored and happy to be here and welcome Nick Hexum from the band 311 to talk about his experiences with the Rose Bowl, the band's 30th anniversary, how he's been spending his time, and how he sure wasn't expecting to spend his time in 2020 for the band's 30th anniversary, and a bunch of other things. So, Nick, thanks so much for being here, and we are really excited to have you here and talk about your experiences. It's I know as a Nebraska guy, you were at the championship game in 2002. Was that your first Rose Bowl experience?
I feel like I had gone to a previous football game there to see USC, and I know I've been to the Rose Bowl a bunch of times, but the ones that really stand out were the actual Rose Bowl game and then the U2 360 concert where they had the claw, and that was just so amazing to see that kind of production and just like what rock and roll can do,
Going back to the game, I mean, tell me what you remember about the game, because those championship games, it's true, they are different. They're a distinction, and for you as a Nebraska guy, I'm sure that was a very milestone event.
It was. I mean, growing up in Omaha, there's no pro teams no big time pro teams in Nebraska. So it's all about Cornhusker football. And, I remember in the 80s in high school, before they even had overtime, when it was Nebraska versus Miami at the Orange Bowl, and they didn't have overtime, and so the clock was running out, and Tom Osborne decides he could have just got the extra point and had a tie and probably been the national champion, but instead he decides to go for two, and they didn't make it. But we felt like we were such winners because he didn't take the easy tie. And then, so like that just sets, the whole mind frame of like how nuts for football we are there. And then they won the national championship in the 90s. But then when they got to the Rose Bowl in 2002, it was more of a harder time. But just Nebraskans are so dedicated and so resilient for their football. So I decided I needed to go, even though I didn't have super high hopes for them to win the game. But just the whole scene, just how it becomes like a city. And the long walk there and driving into the Rose Bowl when you see that incredible bridge with all like the old-fashioned lamps in Pasadena there, and just like the whole look of it, like old school California, just the whole thing is such an experience. But it was a tough game. It was like, I remember it being a total shutout for the first half. They just killed us, and we scored a couple touchdowns later, but it wasn't even a close game. But I just felt good that I was seeing a lot of red shirts there, a lot of Huskers there. So it was kind of a reunion, made me scratch that little homesick itch that you get from being away from home.
When did you move to California?
I actually moved out when I was 17. I graduated a year early from high school. It was 1988. And, I figured, well, downtown is where the action must be, because downtown is the cool place in most cities. So I moved by myself into downtown LA. It was down at 7th and Grand. And then I was unhappy to find out that downtown was not the place you wanted to be in 1988. It was a total ghost town.
That was not downtown LA in 1988 was a lot different than downtown LA in 2020.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, so I was first thought I should live in downtown LA, and I was working at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and as a waiter, and then I realized this just was not the place to be. It was a ghost town, but I met some cool people. And then after my lease was up there, after 6 months, I moved to Hollywood, and I lived right by Guitar Center, Hollywood, and got to meet a lot of my heroes there. Like I sold FLEA from the Chili Peppers a bass, and got to meet like Stevie Wonder, and just being straight out of Omaha, just to be in the center of music was extremely overwhelming, and it was super exciting. And then ultimately I played in, put some bands together, but then I realized like the best people I knew to be in a band with were my friends from high school. So I moved back to Omaha in 1990, started 311, and then all of us moved out together in 1992.
Well, a couple questions to ask with that, and I'll tell you in a second why I asked specifically about when you moved to California. But now I have to ask, because I know you've played with the Chili Peppers many times. FLEA is a friend. He was on my podcast. He's an awesome dude. Did he remember you when you guys played together the first time?
He didn't remember me from Guitar Center, but we got a chance to talk and hang out a lot when we recorded. This was like this dream team. Joe Strummer put together a band to do a song for the South Park soundtrack, and it was FLEA on bass, me on guitar, Tom Morello on guitar, DJ Bonebreak from X, and Ben Montench from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and Rick Rubin producing. So it was like I was just so in over my head, and just like, look at me with these people. It was really cool, and FLEA was really nice, and his book is fantastic. I devoured that right when I listened to audiobooks, so it was really cool to hear him reading his audiobook, and I can't wait. Apparently it's a multi-part section because it ends when the Chili Peppers start, so I'm really looking forward to hearing more of FLEA's books.
Well, wait, we don't know that. It's funny because, like I said, I had FLEA on the podcast, and it's funny because the book Acid for the Children, I agree, it's a phenomenal book. I asked him, I said, because where it ended, I'm like, are you going to do more? And he's like, if you would have asked me months ago, absolutely 100%. He goes, but now I don't know. I have to think about it. So I don't know where he's standing today because, dude, books are a very arduous, long, lengthy. It's like, birthing a child.
And probably a lonely pursuit because you're just so long in the background without any feedback that you could just sit there every day like, is this good? Does this suck? I don't know.
It's a very lonely, isolating thing, and you really need to be passionate about it. But coming back to the Rose Bowl, it's funny. The reason I asked you specifically about when you moved to California is for an Omaha guy growing up in Nebraska to then get the opportunity in 2002 to walk to the Rose Bowl and see your team playing there. Talk about what that must have been. Because the thing is, again, growing up in Omaha, you may not know anything about the Rose Bowl, but still there's the Rose Parade. You are familiar with that iconic imagery.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being aware of the Rose Bowl just from the parade and the games, and I was just infatuated with California life in general, just the whole look of it with the Spanish architecture and the palm trees and the beach, and like I knew I needed to live on a coast, and it wasn't really a question. Like LA was the place for me, and now I've been here for 30 years.
Well, it's funny. You in many ways are. It's interesting because there's this thing, when you have people, right, who come from a place, they take it for granted. But when you have people who migrate to a place, they have a different affinity for it. Yeah. And in many respects, with the wellness and the yoga and the surfing, you've kind of become one of the ultimate California guys from Omaha. Was that something that progressed over 30 years? Or did you know, even as you were fixated on the culture, that one day you were going to be this healthy yoga wellness guy who, what became kind of quintessential California?
Yeah, gosh, it was just a natural fit. I just always wanted the sunshine. I loved the Beach Boys and reggae music. I loved Bob Marley. I just loved the whole kind of sunny beach culture. And it was just calling me, So now living out in Topanga, I try and get to the beach as much as possible, especially now that the kids are out of school and, there's nothing to do. So we go boogie board and go crazy at the beach.
Nice. Is there like a favorite beach spot?
Beach wise, I love to surf out at Leo Carrillo. That's my break. And then I like to take the kids to Zuma or Topanga Beach because it's just nice and sandy and perfect for kids.
Now, it's funny because I know that Perry Farrell is a friend. He surfs a lot. I mean, is there like I know there's a lot of musicians who play basketball together. Is there like and Brandon Boyd's out in that area. He's a surf dude. So is there a surf group of musicians? And if there's not, who would be your dream musicians to surf with?
I don't end up knowing a lot of people out there. I did work with an instructor for a while. I haven't been surfing for a super long time, maybe 2 or 3 years. So this instructor of mine kind of introduced me to a bunch of people out there at Leo Carrillo. But I don't think I've seen a lot of people that I recognize. But then you can tell from looking at them that probably half of them are musicians. So.
See, I like that though. When you're out there though, you guys don't talk about work. You don't talk about you're just out there to surf. You're not talking about the day job.
Yeah, it's just about the chop and the quality of the waves.
Interesting. So it's funny. So this was always a calling to you in life though. So take us back then to what it meant to you to seeing Nebraska play at the Rose Bowl as a kid who grew up there. I mean, do you remember, you talked about the scenery and what it was like, but what it meant to you to know that you had reached this point? Because it is, like you said, it's a convergence of two worlds. It's the hometown life. It's seeing all the friends. Like, for example, I went to the game this year. Was the first time I went to the Rose Bowl. Butch Vig from Garbage is a Wisconsin guy. So we were messaging there. And it's like, it is homecoming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was surprised to find out, how many Nebraska fans were there. And there was just a whole lot of red T-shirts there, and Husker Power and all that. At the Rose Bowl, and I was surprised to find out that there was like a bar on Sunset Boulevard that had all the Nebraska games, and all these Nebraskans would be there. But yeah, it was very, very over, because that iconic white helmet with the N letter on it was just something that I grew up staring at for so long, and then to see that, in California, in my new adopted hometown, was like, this is so cool. But they got beat pretty good, but it was still totally worth it, just the convergence of my two worlds.
So how long did you hang out at the bar before you were like, and it's funny because that's one thing about California, because of the migration from around the world, you can find a bar for any team from any sport for anywhere in Los Angeles,
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually born in Wisconsin, so I'm also a big Packers fan. So I remember seeking out the Packer bar at one point as well. But there's a ton of Wisconsin people out here. Yeah, and that's what makes LA such a special place, is it's a melting pot of ambitious people, but then there's also a certain sort of positive, healthy vibe. You get a lot of ambitious people going to New York as well, but it's not the same sort of like, let's go jogging in the morning kind of vibe that there is here. So it suits me.
Interesting too. Now it's funny, before we come on to the U2 show, dude, just as a fan, I'm so curious. I mean, because I love things like flea markets and swap meets where you find like the coolest, most random stuff. So before we even come on to the U2 show, I have to know, what have been your best finds at the Rose Bowl flea market?
Vintage Levi's was the thing that I was after in the 90s, to get really oversized old jeans. And that's the best place to find them, is at the Rose Bowl swap meet. So I just remember it was just so overwhelming with all the activity in the booths, and that was a fun part to soak in the culture of the swap meet and get some good jeans.
Nice. So how many pairs did you end up getting? And now this was the 90s, so do you still have these same jeans?
I don't think they survived. I think I wish I would have kept them though, because Levi's always do come back. But I had a few pairs.
Well, not only that, they're probably also now worth a lot of money.
That's true.
So it's interesting for you then. I mean, do you go regularly? Is it something you just went for a specific thing? And because it's one of those things about flea markets, is what makes them fun is you go, and then you find all this random stuff that you had no idea that you were looking for, and it's it's those little treasure things that make them the best. Was there one sort of like was there anything else that was, or if you were to go back now, what would be the dream thing to find? What would be like the number one thing that you would hope to find?
The other thing that I remember was to find vintage combat boots there at the Rose Bowl swap meet, and those have worn out, so I would definitely like to go back and find some cool boots.
So as a music guy, what would be your ultimate what would be your ultimate find from like music for records and things like that?
I would love to have, my brother has this old resonator Gibson guitar from the 20s, with the metal plate in it and everything. Like, I would love to have one of those, something that just pre-exists anybody that I know that was, like 100-year-old guitar. That would be quite something to find.
And so you saw U2 there, 2009, right? Was that the only show you've seen there, or that's the one that just sticks out to you the most?
I know there was another one in the 90s, a big concert, but I can't remember. But the U2 one definitely sticks out. It's just the spectacle to build such an incredible thing, and to know all the planning and money and everything that went into it. And then the fact that they became a little bit more comfortable with retrospective music. Like, they played all the songs that I wanted to hear. So it was a really special night.
I remember that show. Black Eyed Peas opened, I believe, and it was it's funny because I've seen them now at the Rose Bowl several times. It's funny when you mentioned the retrospective. I saw them at the Joshua Tree tour, which was amazing because I just happened to grow up on that album. That was sort of a seminal album for my life. But it's interesting. So you say they did all the songs you wanted to hear. So what do you remember any particular songs standing out that night?
I remember that, like, one of their huge anthems, they played like Third, like In the Name of Love or something like Third. I was like, wow, they're going to have finales through the night, something that you would expect that they would save to the very end, but they just have a way to make the whole show a finale. So I was quite impressed.
It's funny what you say too about knowing the production and everything like that. So that's interesting for you then, coming into it. I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought about this. I know that I see shows differently, obviously, but, for you, are you able to how do I want to put this? I know for me, right, when I see a show, when I know something is special is when it takes me out of my day-to-day life, is when I go into a show and I can just get out of everything and get in the mindset of that show. So for you as a musician, knowing the production and everything that goes into it now, are there shows talk about the shows that you're able to see that just take you out of it, or you have that feeling of just like, okay, you can go back to being a fan. You go back to before you saw behind the yellow brick, behind the curtain.
Yeah. I think that there's, such a music can be a vacation, and that's what's the hardest thing about this lockdown, is that we don't have that live music experience where we can just get completely lost and out of our day-to-day. All we have is our day-to-day. And I can't complain. My day-to-day is still pretty good, but I definitely miss both attending and putting on concerts, because it's just like we need a tribal experience where we get together and move our bodies. And then the longer that you've had to live with that music, the more emotional it becomes. Like when I went to the Staples Center and saw Paul McCartney and he opened with Hello, Goodbye, it was just instant tears. You know what I mean? It was just that powerful. And so now to hopefully be that to some of our fans, where it's a very emotional experience because they've spent so long with our music and it takes them back to formative years, like that's a really special thing. That it's an essential service, even though we can't do it right now. It's something that the world really needs. So looking forward to getting back to it.
Well, you were one of the last bands to get to do it, though, because I know that you guys snuck in right under the wire and did something in New Orleans for the 30th anniversary just before the world went to crap. So
Yeah.
tell me about that, and at least you had that memory of a lot of people who were supposed to be touring didn't get to do it. And how long were you guys in New Orleans for, and what'd you do?
Well, this last 311 Day was actually in Vegas.
Oh, okay.
311 Day used to be in New Orleans, and we moved it to Vegas, and it was our first time doing it in 3 nights. So we played over 100 songs over 3 days. So that is like digging deep. It's like running a marathon where there's so much preparation, and then the excitement of the final show, it's almost just like a victory lap, because all the work is reviewing that many songs and getting your chops together and the production. And so it was a really triumphant thing. And we it was close enough to the lockdown that we were aware this is going to be the last show for a while. So it had an extra, emotional weight to it. Like, okay, this is our last time together. Let's make it count. Let's make sure that the fans know how grateful we are to be able to do this, and just really savor the connection.
But it's so funny. I tell the story, right? But I had a meeting in the Valley, actually. I went to dinner with a friend afterwards, and we are watching live as the NBA season is being suspended in real time. And for me as a sports fan, and it's funny because your manager, who's a good friend, and I have talked about this, and it's like, when you're watching a billion-dollar industry shut down in real time, that's when everything becomes real, and you realize, like, okay, this is, so you really did. You were actually in the midst of it and of course, Tom Hanks, who's America's sweetheart, announced that same night that he had it. So were you aware of all this stuff as you guys were on stage, or was it like you do the show and then you come off and it's like, okay, well, the world just changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was no question that we would do the first show, and then the second and third shows, we were like, is it okay? Is there any reports of anybody being sick? Is everything okay? And luckily it turned out that there was no, outbreak connected to it. But it was just such a crazy time when you start to realize how serious it is, like you said, in real time, and hear all this news. And it made me feel a lot of compassion, because there's so many people who, work as like a waiter or something, and their business is getting ready to be closed, because like I said, I used to be a waiter, and so I just was thinking compassionately about all these people that this is a tough time, and so want to be supportive and send out as much good vibes as we can.
Well, it's interesting because obviously the world has had to learn to adjust, and it took a few weeks, I think, where people were figuring out what was going to happen. And at least certainly within music. And the first couple of weeks, no one wanted to do anything. And now I'm doing so many interviews and so busy. And it's interesting because I think once you get to the point of realizing that this is going to be a long-standing thing, you realize music plays such an important part. And you look at, like, the Dylan record that came out earlier, not the full album coming out this week, but the Murder Most Foul, the 17-minute track, and the excitement for that, and the Fiona Apple record, which was amazing. So talk about, for you guys, the importance of having music during this time and keeping the connection with the fans. Because especially, you guys are built on that. I mean, and talk about what it meant to you to get the fan video, to have them give back to you guys.
Yeah, that was a really, like, the song Tranquility from the Stereolithic album is a very emotional song. It kind of was like a lullaby to my daughters about, don't be afraid. And then it turns into like a big rock song, and we played that at the last 311 Day, and then a group of fans got together and did their own version of it, kind of remotely, with all this different split screen. The quality that they did was just incredible. They had me sing a little bit on it too, but just the amount of work and love that went into it was very, like, tear-jerking for me. Yeah, just because of the message of the song, and realizing that it was resonating with people, and that it was important enough to them that they wanted to make a new version so more people would be exposed to it. And just that sense of direct connection that we have with our fans is so important. So it's a bummer now to have to take our summer, our 30th year summer off, but the unity will prevail. We'll be back, and the world will come back. Maybe it'll be sweeter because we appreciate what we missed for one season. So I'm hoping that everything will be back to normal next year.
Fingers crossed. And you guys were, it's funny because I mentioned Brandon Boyd when it came to surfing, and I know you guys were supposed to tour with Incubus. So hopefully, in 2021, because I know that's a package that a lot of people were looking forward to. But before I ask you about that, it's really interesting because you were talking about the McCartney show and how seeing that music that holds this connection to you, how it makes you so emotional because you have the history with it. And so you're watching Hello Goodbye and it brings you to tears. And you're saying that you hope that, your music can have the same connection with fans. So for you as an artist, to know that fans, took the time to do this with Tranquility and that it does mean that to them. And I talk about this with musicians all the time, right? It's like, I always go back to the interview with Dave King from Vlogging Molly. We were talking about this, and it's right, like, there's something, it's really great when you have a song that's a hit record or something like that. But he was telling me this story about a song of his that was used in Houston. There was a police officer who was killed on duty, and he happened to be seeing the funeral live. This was several years ago. And the officer, they played his song under the funeral as it was going. And he was talking about that moment. And it's just like that kind of emotional connection will kick the crap out of a Grammy or a #1 song, I think, any day of the week.
Yeah. Yeah, the music serves such a unique purpose of helping people relate. Like, we all want to relate so much, and that's why we seek relationships, you know what I mean? Because we want to feel understood, and to have a piece of art that makes you relate and feel. Like, if you wrote the sentence, I feel sad, you just read that, okay, somebody feels sad. But if you played some music while you were sad, and you could communicate that emotion more than just through words. So it really has an essential communication and helping us feel connected that shouldn't be undervalued.
Well, for you as a fan, it's funny. Is there one song that you could think of when you were a kid or just discovering music that you would have done the same thing as the 311 fans did with Tranquility? That one song that you would have wanted to send back to the artist in your special way to let them know? Because it's true, when you're talking about the relationship, Matt, when a song really connects with you, like that feeling of you're listening to it and you're like, wow, how did they get inside my head? Like, how'd they know exactly what I was thinking and feeling? So for you growing up, what was that song that or the first one you remember hearing that had that impression?
Probably like just simple Beatles songs, All You Need Is Love, like that. I've always been a unapologetic hippie, and just to have like a simple message like that about, what love can do. And especially during this time, when everybody feels so divided. And I often say, like, if there was like an alien force looking down at us, do you think that they would see us as divided? No, they would say, look at these people, this ecosystem, and they're all like feeding each other and providing services. And it's actually very harmonious, even if we don't feel that way. So focusing on love, and a song, like an anthemic song like All You Need Is Love, is what I'm all about.
All right. So come on to the Incubus tour for a second. Talk about that and, what you were looking forward to about that. And as you say, hopefully, fingers crossed, in 2021, everything will be back to normal and you'll get to do the tour. Have you toured with them before? I know you have to have played like, K-Rock shows with them and stuff, but have you ever done a full tour?
Yeah, we used to tour with them a lot. We did shows with them in the mid-90s, and then on our Transistor tour, which we called the Transistor, they were the opening band. This was 1997. Sugar Ray was the middle band, and then we played. And this was right as we were like starting to blow up. And then we had another tour with them after they blew up with the Make Yourself album, and just had a ball. It was like 2000, 2001. And that's when I became really tight with the guys from Incubus. That was the one year that I brought my own bus because I wanted to have a recording studio, but it actually just turned into the party bus, and I would have these massive parties every night after the show with the guys from Incubus and the other guys in the band, and just tons. I mean, we packed this bus. Like, we would start jumping, and you would see from the outside the whole bus would be bouncing. Just like crazy dance parties and stuff, because we were at that age. I think it was a little bit before Sean Paul came out, but it would have been that, like, the fusing of hip hop and reggae. And I always was the DJ. But it was just like all the best music, and I would just put those on at our dance parties, and we would get the bus actually bouncing.
All right, now, So that was 20 years ago. When you guys get back out on the road, hopefully in 2021, do you see this happening again, or?
I doubt it. I think those were that was a certain place in time. I think now we view it a little bit more of like, I just turned 50, so we view it like we got to conserve our energy. We got to be like an athlete, like where you're in absolute best physical performance on. But back when you're, in your 20s, you have such unlimited energy. You can party all night and then put on a great concert. It doesn't matter. So we've grown up a little.
That's an interesting thing, though. When you look at it, I mean, the 30th anniversary, right? And we're talking about that. Are there artists that you look to? Because the Stones just played the Rose Bowl last year. And I'm not going to lie, they're not always my favorite band, but this show was phenomenal. Like, they were just, I don't know if it was because Mick had the health scare, and so he was just really invested in the show, but it was an absolutely amazing, amazing show. Are there artists that you look to? And U2, of course, is a good example. They're 40-something years in. Are there artists that you look to and admire for the way that they've been able to keep, going and evolve and do different and be different and, still have something to say? And those artists that you look at, and it's funny because, like you said, the crazy thing about it now is you're 50, right? So you got another 20 years at least of music left. So it's like you're kind of at the halfway point, even though when you're 20, you never imagined that, you'd be with the same band for 30-something years.
Yeah. I think I look up to people like Paul Simon, who just have an ability to keep exploring and keep their chops up, and I just had a transformative experience seeing him at the Hollywood Bowl a couple of years ago now. I think it was 2018. But just between how good the show was and knowing that he went through so many exploring different music styles and the Rhythm of the Saints and all that, that to me is something I respect a lot. And so I just want to never lose the curiosity to explore new styles. Like, that's the most important thing. And I still have it. Like, I'm still really excited to demo new songs and playing with a band and stuff like that. So I think it's just about keeping that sort of inner teenager inside you that can get really excited about stuff going.
Well, it's an interesting thing, too, because I think what happens is, and this goes back tying into being the fan coming into the Rose Bowl and, having that convergence of worlds is like you sort of get to tap into that kid, that teenager again, who's enjoying this experience that you imagine would never happen. And so for, what happens is I think as you get older and you do this for a while, you go through cycles where it's like, oh, dude, I'm over it. Like, Mike from Incubus is a good friend. And we talked about when the band took 5 years off and after he went to school. And after that, he was so excited to get back with the band because it gives you opportunity to miss it and do something different. So for you, talk about coming up on this milestone, how that impacts you going forward. It's like when you talk about bands who make the Rock Hall, it's like, because now they're younger. It's like, dude, it's like this isn't like a retirement ceremony for us. This is incentive. So for you guys, talk about what you're looking forward to for 311 going forward.
Yeah, well, I often say, first of all, music isn't something that you pick. Music picks you. Like it's such a strong calling that you never really consider anything else. Like I always say, if you have a backup plan, you're going to use it. So I never had any other kind of backup plan but to do exactly, how my life is now. But and people don't usually willingly retire from music. I mean, Paul McCartney does not need the money, but he still likes to do shows because it's just such a special thing to feel that connection during that time. So when I'm doing a show, I try and really feel what they're feeling and really focus on what they're doing. And it works where I can just completely forget about whatever I was thinking about, on the bus or whatever before the show. I'm completely focused on being there. It's almost like a meditation where you're not allowing any other noise in. You're just being here now. But I definitely miss. It hasn't been that long, but I know I'm going to be really missing it bad when it comes to whenever they start letting us do shows again, because it's just such a part of our being.
Well, now as a fan, an obvious question: who would be the artist that you most want to see do the first show back? For you, if you get to sit in the audience and have that feeling. And it's so funny because I've asked this question of so many people during this time, and it's amazing how diverse the answers are, where some people really want the emotional experience. Some people really want to just get in a crowd and freaking mosh and lose their minds. You know, so it's a mix. So for you,
I would say either, I mean, my biggest formative years were these high school, or when I was in high school, was like the Clash and then the Chili Peppers. So since we can't see the Clash, I would say to see a reunited Chili Peppers with John Frusciante in there, I think that would be a really special thing for me, because like the era with Uplift Mofo Party Plan and stuff around there, like those are my musical Bibles. To hear somebody combining so many different styles and having that much energy, yet really good chops, that was a big influence on me. So sign me up for the Chili Peppers show, maybe at the Rose Bowl.
I think it needs to be Chili Peppers and Stevie Wonder, though.
That'd be great. Superstition, yeah.
The High Ground, you know, which of course they covered.
Yeah.
So for you, it's funny coming back into this though too. It's interesting because, you know, I talked about that, you know, Mike getting the opportunity to be away from music for a bit, and we've talked about this a lot over the years. You guys have so many other ventures. There's so many 311 things now, and it's funny. Something you said to me years ago still resonates with me so deeply. We were doing an interview backstage at a show, and you were talking about the 311 cannabis brand, and you were talking about the fact that, you know, there are now more dispensaries than there are record stores. And until you said that, I had never thought of that, and it blew my freaking mind because, you know, I grew up obviously going to record stores. I still going to records on a Tuesday when the new Peter Gabriel or the new Springsteen or U2 album came out, and I had to go get it that morning, Van Halen 1984. So it's interesting for you, though, having this, you know, all these other things. Talk about how that does allow you to sort of delve deeper into the appreciation for music, because it's anything. I mean, it's like when you take a vacation, you need opportunity to miss things.
Yeah. I mean, and those experiences of getting together, having record stores in its heyday was a unique thing where everyone would be waiting in line for a new album, or I would go down to Tower Records on Sunset and there's like a band playing in store, and I'm like, oh, that's They Might Be Giants, or, you know, it's just something, just to that sort of focus of community that happened at record stores. And that's one thing that's kind of been missing, but fortunately it still happens at concerts, you know. And 311, we had been saying like, man, maybe we should just slow our roll just a little bit because we tour so much. So but we weren't ready to do it. We were planning on working our asses off this year. So I guess the universe decided for us it's time to take a little break.
Yeah, after 30 years, I guess the universe figured, you know, it's been an interesting thing though, because I've spoken about this with a lot of musicians, and, you know, I think it's a really fascinating thing to, and I was just talking with someone from the Rose Bowl before we came on about it's a whole new world. It's a really interesting thing to see how all of this is going to affect people going forward. I mean, so for you, you know, talk about the new things or the things that you're able to, like you said, you know, the kids are off school, you're going to the beach all the time, you know, you're having this family time that you typically would not have in the summer. You know, Travis Barker's a friend, and he and I were talking about the fact like he's doing all these collaborations because, you know, he doesn't have to be on the road. He could just produce and work with other musicians in the studio. People are finding their different groove. So for you, what have been the things that you most appreciate during this time and have been sort of the, you know, again, no one wanted this break, but some of the unexpected pleasant surprises?
I think that I've really focused on acting like a kid with my kids and just playing, and that for us is a lot of outdoor stuff where my youngest daughter is 5 and she'll be like, I might be working on something, making up some work to do, and she'll be like, let's go jump on the trampoline, and I'll be like, you know what, that is exactly what we need to do right now, and just getting into just playing with my kids, and that's been a unexpected blessing where normally I keep my days pretty busy and stuff, but now I haven't really felt comfortable leaving them except for a couple hours here. I come to my studio to catch up on some interviews, but in general, I've been with them all the time. I call it like Little House on the Prairie with iPads, because it's like we're together all the time, and the dad leaves once a week to go get food, and then Dad comes back, and we're all doing homeschooling and trying to just keep everything going. And it's a unique experience. Like, I'm definitely making the best of it. There are some upsides to kind of having a forced staycation.
How are you on the trampoline?
Oh, I can do front flips, back flips, you name it.
But I like the fact, too, when you reach 50, you no longer feel the need to show off. So it's not like we're going to see a lot of, these home videos of. But now it's funny. Do you, how's your daughter on the trampoline? Does she already kick your butt?
One of them can do a sort of half-assed flip. We play soccer and we swim and we try and be outside as much as possible.
Nice. Do you golf as well?
I've golfed with my dad a few times, a handful, count on one hand.
Okay. So you wouldn't necessarily be the type to run and use the Rose Bowl golf course, though?
I think he would really enjoy that next time he's visiting. Maybe I'll hit you guys up.
How often does he visit? Are they still in Nebraska?
Yeah, they actually were getting a place. They were in Palm Springs in the winter, and then when the COVID hit, they're like, we better be back in Omaha where we have our doctors and stuff like that. So I usually get to see a lot of dear old Dad.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that's interesting is, I've talked with a lot of people, the separation of family stuff or having to help out family, things like that, It's a very different, different thing and different time.
Yeah.
So what's been your primary soundtrack during this time, by the way? What have you been listening to most?
I really became obsessed with the hardcore band Turnstile. It's just they've got such an incredible sound. And then so I actually did a little cover of one of their songs, but I slowed it down and did it on 12 string. And then we have a mutual friend, so I sent it to them, and they were very surprised and delighted to get that, because at least one of them said that they had been really into 311, grew up on us. So that's probably my biggest recent find, was the band Turnstile. I've been into this band Nothing But Thieves lately, really killer production, kind of prog rock. But there's just always something new to discover.
I think we're going to wrap up, but I have to ask you one last Rose Bowl question.
Sure.
Well, actually, I'm going to do two questions. One, for you, what would be the dream thing to do? Now, all this time is lost, where, like you said, there's been a lot of advantages to staycation, but you haven't gotten to celebrate the 30th anniversary the way you wanted. What would be the ultimate thing for you to do as a band for the 30th anniversary? What to you would be the dream? And at least, like you say, you got to do 311 Day in Vegas. Where'd you play in Vegas, by the way?
At the Park Theater, which is the state of the art, 4K screens everywhere you look. It's a really beautiful, great sounding theater. But I don't know. I'd like to have a anniversary show in Omaha. Even though we've been out here for so long, there's still just such a connection to the place where you grew up. So but I always, sometimes tour will take me, I'll miss a daughter's birthday or something because I'm over on the other side of the country, and I'll say, well, we'll just have to reschedule it and celebrate your birthday, a week earlier or something like that. So that's what we'll have to do this time. We'll be celebrating next year instead.
Yeah, 31st anniversary. It's all right.
And
now, last question
for 311.
There you go. All right. Now, on a Rose Bowl note, it's funny, because I know for some fans who are so big into sports, for you, which would be the bigger dream come true? Seeing Nebraska win a national championship at the Rose Bowl or headlining the Rose Bowl on your own?
Oh, man. Honestly, sports are important, but music's more important. So I think I would have to go with the 311 concert. But yeah, Nebraska, there's just they're that team that they never lose hope. Even though they've had tough years and it seems like it keeps just getting worse, but they never lose hope. I remember when I was back in Omaha, there was a line of cars. I was like, what's happening over there? They're releasing new Cornhusker merch at a Cornhusker merch store it's like a superstore of just Nebraska football stuff. I'm like, wow, that is dedication. You do not see that in LA.
No, you don't. Although, I mean, I'm old enough to remember also lining up for concert tickets, you know?
That's right.
So, you know, when you did that before everything was online.
Yeah.
I do recall doing it for that, but you're right. For a sports skier, no. Definitely not. Cool. Is there anything that you want to talk about I did not ask you about?
No. Live music must live on. It's an essential service. Thanks,
Cool.
you guys.
Thanks.
You are looking live.
There's something sacred about this stadium and its setting. There's nothing like this venue, in my opinion, in all of sports.
The setting is about as good as anywhere in the country. With the San Gabriel Mountains in the backdrop, it's always picturesque.
We're going to play football. Yes, he's going for the